Hi, and welcome to this PowerShell quick tip video. In this video, we're going to go over the StartJob commandlet. Now, we're going to be using it in PowerShell 7.2, but this commandlet is definitely usable and most useful in PowerShell 5.1 because it allows you to mimic a little bit of doing concurrent processing in PowerShell. Now, we've already seen concurrency in PowerShell 7.2 in the PowerShell Intermediate series, in the redone ones in PowerShell 7.2. So if you haven't seen that, definitely give that a check because you could do some for each loop in parallel processing and be able to do some pretty cool stuff. But what the StartJob commandlet really allows you to do is to give PowerShell a script block, and it will actually execute it in the background and keep running through your script and allow you to still keep scripting if you just want to run part of your script and still code with the IntelliSense active. That is what StartJob is great for. It allows you to just start up another PowerShell process in the background and execute that task. And you can actually check up on that job later on to see if it's done and be able to then execute more things later on. And we're going to see how we can actually use StartJob in PowerShell 7.2 and 5.1 to greatly reduce the amount of time that some of your scripts take. Instead of executing things sequentially using StartJob, we're going to be seeing that and comparing those with the measure command, which we've already seen that commandlet to measure how much time something takes. So let's go ahead and let's actually just create a scenario here where we're going to be doing two calls. Now this could be a call to Active Directory, it could be a call to an API. Any type of call can sometimes take a great amount of time depending on how big your Active Directory is or how much data you're pulling back. Sometimes that can take 10, 15 seconds. Sometimes it could take a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or even longer depending on the data set. So we're going to see how we can actually shrink that down by just not having to execute things sequentially. So let's first start off by writing our sequential script, how we would typically write it without StartJob, and then we're going to look at it with the implementation of StartJob. So first, all I'm going to want to do is actually create two variables here, and these are going to be for my output paths. So this is where we're going to be outputting our data from our quote-unquote API calls. Now in this video, I'm not going to be doing an API call or a AD query. We are just going to do a start sleep just to mimic the amount of time that one of those calls can take. This way it just saves us on a little bit of time here. So let's actually just go ahead and create a second variable for our second output. So if we just start that up here and do output 2.text. All right, and then what we're going to do now is we're going to mimic our two API calls. So the first API call that we're going to do, we're just going to mimic it taking 10 seconds. And all we're going to do is get random, and we are going to then pipe that to a out file and to our file path of output one path. And then we're going to mimic a second API call, which is going to take 15 seconds, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to do a get random and output that to the output 2 path. Now, once we actually do this sequentially, we already know that the file paths already execute, but let's just go ahead and let's make sure that the files are there, because maybe our API call did not work. It's at least going to give us some type of basic error checking here. So we're just going to do an if statement, and we're just going to do an if statement here. And we're going to have two sets of parentheses in here separated by a -and to make sure that both of them are equally there. So we're going to do a test path here, and we are going to do the path on output one path. And we are going to do another test path here. And we are going to do that on output 2 path. We just want to make sure that really both things are there before we do this. We're going to be setting up variables to get content on our path of output 1 path. And that's why we want to do the test. We want to make sure that the paths actually exist before we try to get content from them. So let's just go ahead and let's set two variables, output 1 and output 2. to those output, the get content of those output path variables. Then all we're going to do is we're just going to do a write output here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to output the two values here. We're not going to do anything with them, but we're just going to output them to say that we've gotten data. So if we actually run this here right now, we're going to see that this should actually work perfectly fine. We should get two numbers at the end. They're going to be two random numbers. So we're just going to make sure that everything is working correctly. So the first file is already generated, and the second file should generate very soon as well. All right, and there they are. And there's the two values. So we can see that we have two values perfectly fine. And it didn't take too long. Now, again, these calls that we're mimicking are just 10, 15 seconds. They could be as long as a few minutes in actual production. We never really know how long our API calls are going to take or how long our AD queries are going to take. So let's just go ahead. Let's measure the measure command here. And let's put the expression as the whole thing of code here. And we're just going to delete these two files. All right, and let's just go ahead and let's run this code. Let's see how long it actually takes the computer to actually execute this. This should be around 25 seconds because the rest does not take very long. The main time is really these API calls that we're mimicking take 25 seconds because we are sequentially doing them. So we're actually going to be able to see that we can actually do this much faster. So let's actually just wait for the output here. And there it is. It is 25.07 seconds for the sequential execution of this script. So let's go ahead and let's copy this code. And we're just going to create a new file here. We're going to call it script2.ps1. We're going to paste our info in here. We're just going to remove the measure command for now. All we want to do is just modify this script so it'll actually work with the start job. So the primary parts that we want to send off to the background here is going to be these two API calls that we're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a start job. Now start job is very similar to PowerShell remoting to where it cannot access anything that is outside of the script block because this will be in a whole different PowerShell process. So what we actually need to do is we need to cut, paste these in here. But we also need to copy paste our output path. Now you can supply arguments to these jobs via the argument list parameter. For us, it's a very, very simple script, so we don't actually need to do this. And if you're just using these start jobs to offload API calls that'll just write to files, it is very, very easy to just do it this way. So then all we need to do is we do need to actually execute. Actually, I'm not going to do that right now. We're going to see just how it works if we just do the start jobs. So if we just do the start jobs here, put our second script block, put our second API call in the job here, and copy paste our second output path. All right, and all we want to do now is go ahead and delete these files and try to run our code. Now this code will work. It won't give us any error, but it did not give us our output and our scripts is already done. Now the reason why is because we've offloaded these start jobs and you're going to see the files get generated here, but we never got our output. This is because if we're running these jobs in the background, this PowerShell doesn't know to actually wait for it once it gets to this part. It just thinks, all right, I've offloaded these processes, let's keep going. So what we actually need to do is I like to usually add a little while loop right after here and make sure that the jobs are actually complete. And what I also like to do is if we actually ran this now, we would actually get an output, but it's from the old data that we ran before. So what I like to do here is I like to just start off by doing a remove item, and we just remove the two output paths. And then this way we never have to worry about having old data. that could be detected. Now, of course, when we do the next thing that we're about to do, it wouldn't really make an impact. But let's go ahead and let's set these start job here. We're going to set the first one to be called job 1 and the second one to be called job 2. So now that we have these two jobs, all I like to do is create a little while loop, which is going to be lasting infinity. Now, of course, you can do this multiple different ways. You could do a while loop while the two jobs are still running. Then it is just keeps looping. So what we can actually do is actually do that example here as well. So if we do a job 1 dot state is equal to running. Actually, if we just don't want it to not equal completed, that would actually be a better check. So anything that's not completed, and then we're just going to have to add a second one because we want to make sure that both jobs are done. So this would actually be an or. Now, you might be thinking, shouldn't it be an and? Now, you could use an and in some situations, but the way that we are writing this, it actually needs to be an or. And I'm going to go over that in just a second here. So what we're actually checking here is the job 1 completed? No. Okay, that's good. Is the job 2 completed? No, that's good. So we don't want to do anything. It's going to go inside the while loop and it's going to keep checking. Now, once one of them is equal to completed, so this would actually equivalent to true because, it would actually equivalent to false. So job state 1 is equal to completed. So it's not equal to completed. So this would actually equivalent to false. And then we would have our or job 2 is not completed. So this would actually be true. So it'd be a false or true, which would still equivalent to true because I still need it to be true because both jobs aren't done yet. Whereas if it was an and, that would instantly equivalent to a false and then would exit out of our loop. And we can actually see this in an example here. I can actually set it to and we can actually see what the output would be here. So let's go ahead and let's just run this as is here with our or, and we should get our output properly. So if we actually just run this, it deletes the two files, and then it goes ahead and it runs the two jobs, and then it'll wait to make sure that both jobs are completed, and then it'll give us an output here. So the first output is out here, and the second output is out as well. And there it is. There is our file here. So we can actually see the numbers are correct. So that is all good. So if I actually did this to an and here, what we actually see is if we run this, we're going to get a slightly different result. And there it is. We didn't get any output. And the reason that is because the first job finished and then the and made this exit the while loop. And then right away we went into our if test path, but the two paths weren't there because the second job was not completed yet. So that is a little caveat of the start job. You do have to be really, really careful on the number of jobs that you start, making sure that all those jobs are completed before you actually start manipulating or needing that data. But you're still saving tons and tons of time on the execution because both of these are going at the same time. Now we can actually prove that here by doing a measure command and then doing the expression. And we're just going to start the expression here and wrap the whole thing. So we know that without the start job, it took roughly about 25 seconds. So let's go ahead and let's see what it looks like now. I switched it back to an or, so it should be fine now. And it should output something and we'll get the actual amount of time that it takes. So there's the first output. It's already done. And the second one is now done. So it only took about 16.19 seconds. And now because it's in a measure command, we don't get our actual output, of course. But there is the amount of time that it takes, so 16.19 seconds. Whereas if we're running that sequentially, it takes 25 seconds. Now, I can actually even increase these to more time if we wanted to. If we're talking that this takes 60 seconds and this takes 30 seconds, in sequentially, that would take 90 seconds of execution time. For this one, it would actually only take 60 seconds. It's whichever one is the longest, that's how long it's going to really take. Because they are executing in parallel in two separate processes in the background, they will both be done by the time that the longest one is actually done. So that is the benefit of the StartJob. Hopefully this actually helps you guys in your scripts in production. Now, again, this is super handy if you have a lot of waiting time and you're only on PowerShell 5.1. Again, PowerShell 7.2 and PowerShell 7 in general, you have that capability of doing concurrency a lot easier in PowerShell, but this StartJob is actually very easy to put in directly into your scripts without really making too many modifications, and you could get a significant boost in your processing time. Now, if you only have one API call, like you're only making one call to Active Directory, and then you're just processing that data, this is not something that's going to save you time. But if you do have multiple calls to APIs to Active Directory, this is definitely the type of script that will save you a lot of time once you have multiple calls that you're waiting on. If you only have one, you won't really see the benefit. But if you have more than one, I would definitely take a look into the StartJob commandlet. If you guys have any comments or questions, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys have any commandlets that you guys would like me to look at, please let me know in the comment section down below as well. Also, if you can, just please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, also hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.